human behaviourist, Jemma King, has a mission to make good people better. Her work with Olympians, Special Forces personnel and even bull riders has cemented her belief that no matter what we encounter in life, we all have the capacity to live happy, successful and fulfilling lives. I've always felt a little bit intimidated by people who study our minds because I always feel like I'm being analysed when I'm in their company. But what I realised when I was speaking with Jemma is what they see in others, they actually understand where it comes from and why we do the things we do. Jemma made me realise that even psychologists and human behaviourists are not perfect. Thank you, Jemma, so much for joining me. And I must tell you, I've been a little bit scared about interviewing you because Amy said to me, Mum, she will have you pegged in about 10 minutes. But anyway, so I might have to ask you how you pegged me at the end of it.
I'm an empty vessel.
I want to talk about how you grew up, because I think you grew up on a farm, and I imagine...
Well, not really.
No. Okay.
Yeah, here and there, but not like you guys.
Oh.
Yeah.
Still, you know, it's bush is the bush.
Yeah.
But I believe that you were a bit of a tomboy, and I think you might have rebelled because now you just look like you walked out of the Vogue magazine.
But last night or this weekend, people would not agree with me. I look like a girl, but I act like a boy.
Oh. Yeah. Well, I'm not saying you act like a boy, but...
Well, my dad wanted boys, so he really did treat us growing up like, don't be, girly, don't be precious, don't think that you can't do anything that boys can do. It was like no question, just you're going to do it.
Mm.
So I think that's where the tomboyness came from.
So did you have all sisters?
So there was just my sister and I. She's older, 23 months older than me, and we had a really unusual childhood in that we grew up in hotels. My dad was a hotelier, so we'd 4 or 5 star hotels. We'd move every 3 years. Yeah. And so we didn't live in a normal house. We lived in the manager's apartment in these hotels. So we didn't have your traditional backyard or pets or even a kitchen. Mm. So we used to eat most of our meals in the restaurant or have room service. And and so my dad's family, they're first fleeters. So came on the Cirrus in 1788. And it was Marine Corporal Gowan, and I think there was another one as well. So he was I like to say we were convicts, but we actually weren't. And he, so they settled in Western Sydney in Appin, and my dad's side were dairy farmers.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, wow. And so he's a real country boy, my dad, and then... did ag science and was going to do veterinary science. I think did some veterinary science, and then ended up getting a scholarship or an internship into Southern Pacific Hotel Corporation, which was a big hotel company, and then was just really good at it. Mm-hmm. And my mum, she was a teacher, and they met when they were very young, and then so they, as young 19, 20-year-olds, started running hotels.
Wow.
And then sort of had us, and my mum, had a baby on the hip and was at reception cooking breakfasts and, cleaning the rooms and with us, my sister and I. And then, they would move every couple of years. And then, by year, the hotels would get bigger and more stressful. And there would be then Dad became area manager and had a whole lot of hotels that he was running. And during the 80s, so you can imagine what that was like. It was pretty hedonistic days.
Yeah.
And so we had a really unusual childhood. So we'd see just, exorbitant opulence and people who were super hedonistic, just living in hotels, going to, Formula One and America's Cup and parties and balls and cocktail parties and all. I just remember my mum just being dressed in this most amazing glamorous outfits in the 80s with big shoulders and big hair.
I remember those big shoulder pads, yeah.
Oh. Yeah, so my dad looked like, he was at Larry Hagman of Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
And my mum looked like, is it Linda Evans?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
because he was a bit tough, wasn't he, your dad?
Yeah. He was very tough. He actually died last year, the year before. And it was actually good because he was very sick for a very long time. But he was a very tough man, very sort of charismatic and successful, but crazy. Like very, very bipolar, I think. So, he ruled with fear.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think he did really well. I think the way he managed and way he operated probably would not wash now, but his tactics were very successful. And but my mum was the gorgeous one. She was gracious, and like having a mum like her was just so amazing. She used to teach sort of socially and emotionally disadvantaged children. And so this, when we moved up in Townsville, she would teach Indigenous kids and kids from Thursday Island, and just lower socioeconomic kids that had a lot of disadvantage in their lives. And so she was super philanthropic and very caring, and just like an amazing woman. Well, I speak to her every day. So she lives in Sydney now. Yeah.
Oh, just what happens to you in your childhood, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, you do take through into your adulthood. And
so I'm thinking, what am I doing to my kids?
I was going to, we'll get on to your kids later, because I can imagine that you often get some eye rolls because teenagers just do that.
Well, they're 20 now, like 20, 21 and 25. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they're older now.
Yeah. Wow. So your early career, because you had a checkered early career too.
Checkered, yes, that's what my father would say. So I was always like super inquisitive as a kid. Like I had this voracious appetite for wanting to learn about things, and very scientific minded. I mean, that probably came from my grandfather. He was an anaesthetist, and he used to teach science, and he was, taught chemistry. And he was very sort of academically minded, where my father did not really encourage me into academia. My mother she was always studying throughout our childhood. She was doing a master's, adult education, theology actually. And so as a child, I was always doing little science experiments. I'd have a little chemistry kit that I was playing with. I used to dissect animals. I wanted to be a forensic scientist, which was a bit morbid, but just loved science. And I didn't really talk much because my sister was older and she used to talk for me. And so I was just like, climbing trees and catching bugs. And then we moved around a lot. And then I left home, and I think I was about 17, 18. And then I decided to go overseas. And I sort of finished school, and I started doing science at uni, doing biology and physiology, and looking at all the body. And then I was like, I really want to get out of Canberra. We were living in Canberra at the moment, and so I remember walking down the street, and I saw it was like one of those Flight Centre places. I think that was Flight Centre, but one of those places where you buy a ticket, and I could see Italy, and I was like, I want to go to Italy. And so I said to my parents, I want to go to Italy. And they were like, no, you've got to finish uni. And so I just went and bought a ticket myself out of the money that I'd saved up while waitressing. And I remember it was $1,700, and it was an Aeroflot ticket. And I had a stopover in Moscow. And I remember getting on this Aeroflot flight, and it was when you could still smoke on planes. And I remember people saying, buy the smoking section because there's you get more seats. So it was disgusting, and I'm sure all of the air hostesses were drunk, and because Russians, they love to drink. And so I ended up having a 2-day stopover in actually Moscow, and I went and stayed with a girlfriend of mine whose parents were in the embassy there, and then ended up living there for nearly 2 years.
So you didn't get to Italy?
I did later when I had to renew my visa.
Okay, yeah.
And yes,
so stopped, and so it was a very interesting time over there. So share the stories from there, because I loved listening to those stories.
My parents, when I came back, they were like, pretend that you were over there teaching English, because I wasn't. So as I grew up in hotels, so I knew a lot about hospitality. It was kind of in my veins. I could walk into a restaurant or a bar and just feel like what was right or wrong, or what needed to be done, and I just sort of lived it all my life. And not that I was really interested in it, but I remember when I was staying with my friend, and she said, "Let's go to Rosie O'Grady's." So every country has an Irish pub in it, and this was just back when there was still communism, and it was teetering on the edge of collapse. And so there were a few foreigners there, lots of Irish, Americans, but it was pretty much hardly any foreigners compared to now. So we went to the Irish pub, and they said, "We're opening up our, operations. We need more people. Do you want to come and work for us?" So this was a company called Irlasto, and they were bringing Western society to Russia, and that was in the form of supermarkets and restaurants and nightclubs and clothes shops. And they said, "Can you run restaurants?" And I was like, "Yeah, yes." I was like just 19 or something. And so my first job was consulting to a Chinese restaurant called Lily Wong's, setting that up, like the structures and training all of the employees, and then so I did a good job there. And they said, "Oh, look, we're opening up this nightclub. Do you want to come and work in this nightclub?" And I said, "Yeah, okay, that sounds like fun." And so it was in this old theatre. It was beautiful. It had like these huge big columns, and there was marble. It was like one of the, from the 1800s, with huge big doors. It was just like exquisite. And so they decked it out with this amazing sort of nightclub. And I was bar manager, and the actual manager was this Irish guy, and he was gay. And they found out that he was gay. And I was actually flatting with him in an apartment, and they said, "You've got till tomorrow to get out of here."
Oh,
yeah. And so he just packed up and left. And then they said, "The job's yours," because I made a huge effort to learn Russian. So none of the foreigners would speak Russian. They'd always just hang out together. They'd hang out in Rosie O'Grady's, the bar, the Irish pub. But I went and lived then with a Russian family, and I thought, if I'm in Moscow, I want to immerse myself in the culture. So I would take around this little notepad, and I'd phonetically write down every word. I was like, "Well, how did you say that?" And I would try and only think in Russian and try and speak in Russian, because it's really hard for us to do the r and the h. So I'd be sitting, there going r, 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 trying to get the muscle group so I could say it properly. And so the Russians really appreciated me being sort of more engaged in their culture. And so they said, "Look, the job is yours." Little did I know what was coming. It was you could imagine, it was wild, wild west there. It was just...
So talk me through some of the things that happened while you were there.
So this was an Irish-Russian joint venture. So any foreign company that came in, they actually had to have a national partner. And this is basically meant, pretty much back then, partnering with ex-KGB or mafia, which they were kind of similar. So the mafia back then was organised in what was called suburbs. So every business who was there had to pay a certain amount of money to the mafia as protection money. They called it muscle or butter money. And so the mafia that we had to pay was kind of the most powerful in Moscow at the time, Orekova mafia. And basically this mafia was constructed of, there was the guys at the top, but they just went out into the villages. And back in that time, if you were good at one particular sport, they sent you to a town, and that was a ballet town, or that was a shooting town, or that was a football town, or that was a boxing town. And all the kids who were good at any type of sport were sent to that town. And so they went out to the town where all of the national boxing champions were, all these really big, big country boys who could fight. And they said to them, well, when perestroika started to dismantle, they stopped getting funding. So the mafia went out there and said, "Hey boys, do you want a BMW, a Versace shirt, a gold chain and a gun? Come to the city and we've got a job for you. And they were just like, just country boys, didn't know anything about anything. And so they were brought into this world of guns and drugs and prostitutes, and like it was pretty terrible. So luckily the guys that would look after the nightclub I thought some of them were okay, they were country boys, but there was always in the group, there was one guy who looked weird and looked dangerous and really frightening, and he was the guy who did all the bad stuff. Anyway, so I was given a phone number, and they said, if anything goes wrong, call this number. And so, of course, many things went wrong. So this, we were the biggest nightclub in Moscow at the time, and we used to have this line out the front where people were trying to get in the middle of winter, and we had a gun, like what are they called, a metal detector, over our front doors where you had to come in. And so, because everyone would carry weapons at that time, and also mace, like sprays. And so we had like all the movie stars, all of the soccer stars, all of the politicians, all of the mafia, like anyone who was of Moscow society would turn up to our nightclub, big fur coats. It was like, 1930s Chicago. It was like me as like this dumb, like Aussie kid just going, this is just bizarre. It was crazy. And so we would have artists and singers, and like everything was super extravagant, and everything was like very expensive. And people would come up and order bottles of champagne and bottles of vodka, and they would carry literally cases of cash, because at that time the ruble was falling at a dramatic rate. So then we set up a money exchange at the front of the nightclub, where some people would come in with bags of rubles and exchange them for US dollars. And then, they'd go and spend the US dollars inside, and as they came out, their rubles would have like fallen so much that they would be worth nothing. So it was really fascinating to see that. But then, so they would come in and they'd check in their weapons. But every now and again, there would be someone who would get in with a weapon, and, they'd pull it out at the bar and, start waving it around, or, put it to someone's head. They put a gun to my head once because I didn't pour the vodka properly. Oh. And these were obviously like politicians or people who were part of the police force. So yeah, we had people who were killed in the nightclub out the front. Like, it was really like dangerous. And it was, looking back now in hindsight, I go, oh my God, what was I doing? But I was just so young and dumb, and just thought, oh, this is not my life. It's so interesting and fascinating. I just did not realise like just how dangerous it was. But we had quite a few terrible incidences. But one of the ones I remember, I for some reason thought, hey, we need to do some marketing, and so I said, let's do a beauty contest, and let's look for Moscow's most beautiful woman. So it was like Miss Moscow competition, and really it was a really bad move, because when we advertised, we put it out on radio and in newspapers, and so we had a couple of days of selecting the girl who would become Miss Moscow. And we had a line out the street, down the corner, and there were thousands of girls just turned up, because I thought, this is my opportunity to get out of poverty. And we had everyone and their dog there. The most amount girls were turning up. Like, obviously they'd come in from the country of abject poverty, in pretty much just like rags and like old like their dad's boots or something with mud all over them, but were stunning. And we had to let me think about what were we thinking. And so we had all the managers there, the Russian managers and the Irish managers who flew over from Ireland, and they would just come through like this, for hours and hours and hours and hours. And then I started getting phone calls saying, Jemma, if my girlfriend doesn't win, you are dead. And I was getting extorted, but because they were like, my girlfriend needs to be the most beautiful woman in Moscow. So over that time, I actually moved apartments 9 times. And I had a driver who would have to stay with me all the time because I'd get people coming up and threatening me, saying, and like I thought that's can't be right. And the Russian manager said, listen when they threaten you.
Wow. So what ended up happening? Like, how did you move through that?
I just disengaged and said to the Russian managers, you have to deal with this because this is politics, this is dangerous, and I can't choose. And I think they chose someone whose girlfriend was in, high up in the mafia or something, or the KGB, I don't know. I just had to, but I had to move apartments a lot.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow.
But
tell me about that when you got kidnapped over
there. So that was when I first arrived. I think I'd been there only a few weeks, and I didn't spoke hardly any Russian at all. And so over there, they didn't have taxis back then. You would just step out to the street and put your hand out, and someone in a Lada would pull up, and then you'd say, where to go, and then you just pay them. But little did I know that if you sat in the front and you're a female, it meant that you were paying with something else. And I had no idea. And so I, as an Aussie girl, sort of sat in the front. I was going into the nightclub, and I just had on just a jacket and a skirt and high heels. And I was like, take me to Club 2x2, Ulica Tchekova. So we're driving along, and this taxi driver just starts touching my leg. And I'm like, looking as if to say, what are you doing? I'm like, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and then he's just rubbing my leg. And then I'm like, no, what are you doing? And then he starts sort of swearing at me. I didn't know what he was saying back then. And then he's putting his hand right up my skirt. And then we stop at the lights because there's a car in front of us. And then he just turns to me and starts like this and just trying to molest me, really. And I just had that, thought, this is actually serious. This is actually happening. It was kind of it just really hit me like a ton of bricks. But he was literally strangling me. And I tried to get out of the car and to get into the snow, and he pulled me back by my hair. And then I just something came over me, and I just went into his nose, into his throat, and sort of had a bit of a tussle with him, and just fell out into the snow and just started running. And I was like, oh my God, because he was actually taking me out to the forest, and I'd heard stories about that. In fact, a lot of my waitresses had been taken out to the forest and had things done to them. So I was just basically saying, the trajectory of my life is not going to change today because of him. And and I just had this rage come over me, this absolute fighting, this deep, visceral rage.
You would have been in shock, but I bet he was in shock too at this pretty little tiny girl attacking him.
He was thinking, what are you doing? You're sitting in the front seat. This is the guy, right? This is what you do.
Did you ever while you were there, did you tell your mum any of these stories?
No.
Oh.
Yeah, no.
She would have gone over there and dragged you back by your hair.
Well, not really, actually, because did I ever tell you at the time when I was actually in the apartment? This is before I'd moved out. And I was in the... I had this compound where all the embassy people would living, and this is when Yeltsin sort of drove in on the tank, and the last communist resistance were holed up in the White House, and this was what was it called, the October last hurrah that the communists had, and they were all shooting at everyone. Everyone was shooting at everyone, and it was basically. The new regime was coming in, and the old people didn't like it. There was, the economy was absolutely shot. And so Yeltsin comes in and stands up on this huge big tank, and they're shooting in at the White House. And I was right next to, very close to the White House, looking out the window. And I was with one of my other girlfriends from my school, and she was very, a little precious, I would say, and she's freaking out, and I'm just looking out the window going, oh my God. And then it was all over the news in Australia that a civil war had broken out in Moscow, and it was state of emergency. And so the parents said, oh, look, you better call your parents and tell them you're still alive. So she rings up her parents and she's like, Mum, Dad, and they're like crying and she's crying. The parents are like, get on the first plane out of here. We'll do anything. We'll get you out of there. You know, it's so dangerous. You're going to die. And she was like hysterical. Parents, I could hear them, you know, quite hysterical. And I'm like, oh no, I better call my parents. And then so I ring Mum, and it was quite like some ungodly hour at home. And I'm like, hi Mum, you know, I'm here. And I'm like, can you hear that? Like Yeltsin is literally like bombing the White House, and I'm holding out the phone, and there's all this like battle noise going on outside. And I can remember my Mum sort of paused for a moment, and then she was like, Gemma, you are so lucky. You are witnessing history. Just savor it, darling. Just savor it. This is miraculous that you are getting to see a moment in time that will never happen again. And she was like very much encouraging that this should, my perspective, this should be one of intrigue and one of gratefulness and one of, you know, that I'm witnessing history rather than, you know, useless terror and, you know, getting hysterical, because there's no way we're getting out of there. All the planes have been grounded. And so I could see my mum probably had a moment like, oh shit, this is awful. My, you know, young girl's over in a foreign country and there's a war, but she was pretty much, you know, seized the moment.
Yeah. So, but do you think she really believed that you were lucky, or was she just trying to
Kind
avoid
of
fears?
No, I think, yeah, like in a way, but probably a bit of both.
Yes.
My parents were always like adventurous, like the craziest, most out there story that you can tell, or the better, particularly my dad, because he loved to get drunk and tell stories about my daughter did this and my, you know, so yeah, they were very much encouraging of doing crazy, dangerous stuff.
Wow.
So yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Lucky you came back. Lucky you got back.
Yeah, well, when I got back, I think my dad popped a bottle of champagne to celebrate me, you know, getting home, and I like ducked under the table, and the mum's like, are you okay? Do you need anything? I'm like, no, I'm just like, because like when something popped in the nightclub, it could have been champagne, but it often was something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we had someone had their head blown off at the front door, and the OMON, which was the special mafia response team, like they had been raised to deal with the mafia problem at the time, and they came and they said, yeah, who is this mafia guy? And I'm like, I don't know, but can you please move him, because, you know, we're about to open and there's all these people, you're about to step over him. And they just put a sheet and said, no, he's a gangster. He doesn't get respect, and we want people just saying this is how gangsters are treated.
Wow.
Yeah, stepped over. So
it's so hard to comprehend.
Oh, like yeah, even as I speak, I'm like, I can't believe that actually happened. But
Yeah.
you know,
Just
yeah, it was a moment in time.
Oh God. Now tell me about the biopsychoanalytics. So that's your company, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was all accidental. Nothing that I've done has actually been planned or really strategically, you know, set out to do what I did. So I went down to do my PhD at the Special Forces. Well, just going back, actually, I was at uni up in Queensland, and I was, you know, had just broken up with my partner of 12 years, my husband and the father of my 3 kids. And it was really stressful. It was awful. You know, I didn't have a job. I didn't, you know, have any resources, because he made sure of that. And then my family was down south, and I was like, oh my God, what do I do? And so I remember going to my supervisor. He said, like, why don't you do honours? What do you want to study? And I said, I don't know, I want to study unethical behaviour, because I felt really sort of slighted by some unethical behaviour. And so I started researching unethical behaviour, and I thought, you know what I am? I'm really stressed, really, really stressed. Maybe I should study stress. And so then I just started doing stress research, and then I was testing cortisol, and cortisol testing is very expensive. And so there was a call out from the Australian Army Research Scheme that they were going to do funding for novel research. And then my friend said to me, you should go and apply for this research. And I was like, Army? No way. That's like the last thing I want to do. I don't agree with, war, or I don't know anything about it. I don't know anyone. I don't know the culture. And I just had a sort of a negative perspective of the forces. Being at uni all the time, you didn't hear anything good. And so I said, no, I don't want to do that. And then my friend said, look, you should just go for the interview. And so I was looking at, does emotional intelligence buffer stress? That was my kind of research question. And then measuring stress through cortisol. So, because I know when people talk about stress, they either lie, either fabricate, catastrophize, or people underreport stress. So I said, we need to find an objective way to measure stress. And so I was like, oh, okay. So then I knew this guy from the military was coming up. There was like 200 people they were going to interview up in Queensland at the universities to try and see who they would give the money to. And I was like, oh, I've got no chance. So then I thought I'd take a different tact. And so I researched who this guy was and realised that he was a war historian and he'd written these white papers. And so I read these papers. They were boring. And so I remember there was this long line of people going to be interviewed by this guy. And I was with my supervisor. And I sit down and he goes, what's your name? I said, Jemma. He goes, what's your research? And I said, it's a preemptive approach to stress using emotional intelligence training, using, cortisol. And he's like, oh. And then I'm like, oh, before we start, I read your paper and I just want to know, what did you mean by this? It was fascinating. And I'm just like, asked all these questions and he's like, oh. And he just puffed his chest out and just started talking about himself.
To his ego.
And then my supervisor's looking at me like, what do you, like, we need to talk about your research. And he's just going, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, it's fascinating. Tell me more, like this. And then he goes, where I was from time, tell me about your research. And I said, well, blah, blah, blah. And he said, you know what? I've suffered from mental health disruption. I love it. It's really, really good. I just think this is fantastic. And I love the objective nature. And then it was time up. We went out and my supervisor went, yes, that was brilliant. Oh my God, can't believe it. And I said, yeah, I used emotional intelligence. And then she was super excited. I was super excited. I was like, yeah, probably got it. And then I heard nothing for like 6 months. And I was like, I've obviously just buggered that up. That was dumb. I don't really care anyway. I didn't really want it, And then I get this email out of the blue saying, congratulations, you've won the Army research funding. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do now? Because I'd prepared to go into a bank and I was going to test bankers and on street, like people who did trading and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then so my life, it was like sliding doors. I just took this trajectory and towards the military. And I'm like, what am I going to do? So then I actually went and got a meeting with the intelligence corps up here because the guys there were very stressed out because they'd have to see a lot of really awful material and have to make decisions like were quite stressful. And then I met a woman who was in defence intelligence. She said, no, go and work for Special Forces. So then she told them about me. They said, yes, you've got to come and work with us because our population has seen the most amount of kinetic, engagement. Most guys have been killed. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I'm like, was it literally like, what's the Special Forces? I was so naive. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. So then I went down there and basically did 2 years of research. And I was thinking, these guys are going to be like, silverbacks on crack, like, dumb, just meatheads that like killing people or something. I had this perception in my mind. But when I went down there, they were the most intelligent. They had like IQs of around 140. They were incredibly fit, incredibly well-read, incredibly philosophical. They were literally my best students. They would sit up the front, they'd take notes, they'd do their homework. You know, if you said something, they would remember it, they'd research it, they would embody it. So, and I learnt so much from them. So I spent a lot of time sort of ethnographically inserting myself in the environment and just looking at what they did, how they dealt with stress, interviewing them, observing them. And then they got me to do a whole lot of stressful stuff as well. So they kind of said, you know, you could parachute, threw me out of a plane. I got to rappel off a 90-foot tower, shoot guns, like did a full mission profile, did like all this sort of cool stuff, which was, it was quite stressful because I you need to know what stress is, right? Mm-hmm. And so then created this package around how do you deal with stress, and it was a biopsychosocial package. And so from there we just did lots of research, and then they asked me to come back and consult some more because a lot of the other guys who didn't get my training wanted my training. And so because it was a biopsychosocial construct, later on when I started actually incorporated my business, because all these other people started saying, can you come and do that training for me? Can you come and talk at my business? And I needed to get an ABN and create a business. So then I was like, biopsychoanalytics. And I just came up with it, yeah. Mm. And so that's how that started. It was just accidentally.
You talk a little bit about, or you talk about post-traumatic stress versus post-traumatic growth. So while we're talking about the military, talk me through that, what that looks like and what that is.
Yeah, what would upset me is that whenever everyone would talk about the military, particularly Army or Special Forces, the narrative was pretty negative, like, oh, PTSD, and, you know, there's, these guys must be really messed up, and why would anyone want to do that job? You know, you just end up with PTSD. But what I was seeing was a bunch of highly functioning, very smart, very sane men. That was my experience. Like, there were a few that, you know, of course, had seen the worst of the worst, but comparatively with what they'd seen, I thought they were coping pretty well, actually. And I was like, well, this is not resonating, this whole PTSD narrative. And so then I got really interested in looking at, because I'm not interested in dealing with PTSD because it's just not where my passion is. I'm dealing in, I was really wanted to deal with making good people better rather than making damaged people normal. Mm. And so I started researching the concept of post-traumatic growth. And, you know, when people have a catastrophic episode in their life, something that's, you know, utterly significant, you know, the data shows you actually 60% of people actually come out of it better. Like, they have a better perspective on life. They are more motivated to do good things. It really kind of, you know, knocks out any bullshit out of them because they're like, wow, I just came very close to death, or I've seen people lose their lives like that. I need to really readjust my perception on life. And so that's what I was seeing. And I think just like, you know, your physiology gets inoculated by a little bit of virus, you know, that's what inoculation is. If you are inoculated with small amounts of stress or trauma, it actually shocks you into thinking about how you can be better, stronger, more resilient. And so this is what we were teaching. We were teaching, like, just because something bad happens to you doesn't mean that's it, that you are going to be broken forever. You are actually statistically more likely to become back better. So when I was teaching all of my stuff, we never talked about mental health disruption. We talked about performance optimization. We talked about how to make yourself better, because a lot of these guys did not want to talk about the PTSD or, you know, being broken, or even the word resilient. I didn't really use that too much because resilience means that something bad happened and you were coming back. It was like, hey, you guys are incredibly, capable. You do the hardest things on the planet. Let's try and make you better. And in essence, what I was talking about was the same things that would stop you or get you out of PTSD, but I just didn't use that broken language. I used that performance language. the optimization language. And I think that that's a really important story to tell. And, you know, if I had stayed there and spent a lot more time doing that work, I really would have been saying we need a public relations campaign and stop this narrative and start showcasing men who are doing really well, who are shining beacons, who should be, you know, the role model, not only for other guys in the military, but for young boys and young girls who just think, I'd really like to do that, but I don't want to end up broken. And I think there's so many incredible stories of men who have just done amazing things and have done so well.
I interviewed Tim Thomas the other day, and exactly that, like he was in Afghanistan and saw, you know, the worst things, but he's come back and he's helping people and he's strong and he's positive and he's got a good thing going on. And he told a story about ego, and he said he realised what coffee did for people, and so he thought,
he never drank coffee.
I'm going to take coffee to everybody. And so he made coffee for his team, and he thought, now, what, if I do this, they're going to think that I'm less than them, but I have to let that go. And so they called him the brew bitch. But he said they would drink the coffee and he would just see them change in their thought and what they were doing and how they saw things, and they relaxed, and you know, they weren't in Afghanistan anymore. While they had that cup of coffee, they were in their little coffee shop in, you know, with their partner But so that was really interesting. So it's interesting you say that about the growth, because I saw that firsthand with him.
Yeah, I mean, you think it's people who've had cancer and come back, they do better. You know, I think, like, I know for myself, when, like, one of the most difficult parts of my life was having a marriage breakdown. And honestly, like, if I hadn't experienced that, I definitely would not have grown in the ways that I'd grown. I was forced to grow. So I think that we've got to stop this, you know, narrative that if something bad happens to you, that's it, you're broken for life. I really disagree with it.
Because you can't have things good all the time either, can you? And everybody's going to go through stuff, and you're right, it's what makes us better people. And
I think you need a roadmap, a pathway, or a narrative, or like you need to get into vernacular, the language of growth. And I think that unfortunately a lot of people have woundology, so they're bonded by their suffering, they're bonded by their victimhood, they're bonded by being broken's better than being invisible. And people don't want to be invisible. So it's easiest to go, I'm broken, I'm a victim, I'm suffering, because that's all you hear. Where if you just teach people to say, I've grown from this, I've got so much out of this, it's made me have a greater perspective, it's made me see different horizons, I've experienced parts of my psyche that I never knew existed. I think that's what we need to be propagating out there. I mean, you've got to have the cold to feel the hot. You've got to have the contrast. None of us can be naive to think that we're going to swan through life with that, you know, living in a feathered nest. And in fact, you know, a little bit of stress is very good for you. Physiologically, it's very good for you. And you shouldn't protect your children, like, you know, from everything. They need to be hardened, you know, to withstand the winds of life.
Tell me why stress is good for us.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a U-shaped curve where certain amount of stress inoculation does, you know, I mean, physiologically, you know, physical stress increases bone density, muscle density, increases coordination. So that's why you've got to let your kids crawl on dangerous things, not really dangerous, but like you've got to let them fall over, you've got to let them climb trees, you've got to let them get dirty. So their immune system, their gut biome has a little bit of a inoculation. So just from a physiological perspective, you need to pressure, an oak tree will not get strong unless there's some wind, right? And so physiologically, definitely. But then from a psychological perspective, you know, if you ever looked at anyone interesting, they've had a hard life, right? Those people that have had these feathered nests and have, you know, a cushy life and have been precious, they're just no depth to them. There's nothing interesting about them. And I think that what having some stress in your life does, it gives you a different vocabulary, increases your granularity of emotion. So you don't just feel sad, there's just 5 variations of sad. And so are you melancholy? Are you despondent? Are you rageful or angry? And when you've got many words for that same feeling, you don't go from 0 to 200 because you go, I know there's 5 steps before I get sad, right? And so what you're giving people is permission to have a multitude of different emotions before they get to something really bad. And there's a lot of research saying that the more emotional vocabulary people have, the better mental health they have. And so that takes experiencing many different things. And I think experiencing different types of stress is incredibly important. When people feel stressed, hopefully, they reach out to other people. And there's nothing more, nothing better for stress than social engagement. Stress causes cortisol, and one of the greatest cortisol antidotes is oxytocin. So oxytocin is the love hormone. You get it from, laughing, kissing, hugging, being around other humans that care about you. And so unless you've had some stress in your life, maybe you don't think to reach out, or maybe you don't know to reach out to someone else. But that reaching out and that social connection is incredibly good for you physiologically, but also incredibly good to reduce stress. So, stress is good up until a certain point, but then when you've had unchecked, unmanaged stress for, I say, 8 weeks, around 8 weeks, things will start to go wrong. And that's for a multitude of reasons, because cortisol shuts down a whole lot of your basic systems in your body, like your immune function, digestion, bone cell, regeneration, ruins your sleep. Sleep deprivation is crazy maker. We use it as torture for a very good reason, because it makes you crazy. What else does stress do? It ruins your relationships. It makes you myopic. It makes you reactive. It makes you less trusting, less trustworthy. It makes you suspicious. It stops your ability to learn properly and take on new information. It stops creativity, innovation. Like it's bad. But there's a certain point, and everyone's got a different point of where stress starts being bad, and that's predicated on so many different things, like your genetics, your epigenetics, your grandparents' lives, your intrauterine environment, how much cortisol were you exposed to in your mother's environment?
I found that really interesting.
Yeah.
I listened to you about that. So
if you are in the womb of a mother who's highly stressed, so it's basically training your neural architecture to be ready for an environment that's dangerous. So you will process glucose in a different way. Your reactivity set point will be lower. You'll sort of kick off quicker. You will be a much more of a suspicious person. It does change your whole endocrine system, and then when you get out into the world, how much cortisol you were exposed to in your mother's breast milk. Did you even get breast milk? How dangerous was your environment? What were you fed properly? Were you cold? Were you hungry? This all changes you completely. And then how did your parents respond to stress? Were they calm? Were they have catastrophic reactions? And then also things like, what is your glucose level in that moment? How much have you slept? How much have you eaten? What is your socioeconomic status? How many resources do you have? And how many people around you do you have to help you? All determine how much you can cope with stress in that moment. So it's very complex, and it changes over your life too.
So when is stress good for us? Because I know you've worked with the Olympic swimming team.
Yep.
So tell me about some of the work that you did with them and how you around stress too.
When I was at the Special Forces, John Bertrand, he was friends with Rick Burr, who was head of the army at the time, and John was going around looking for ways to help the Olympic swim team perform under pressure, because in Rio Olympics, they realised that they probably didn't prepare enough for that performance under pressure piece, where they kind of faltered. And so John had gone everywhere, like, because he'd, for those who don't know John Bertrand, he'd won the America's Cup. He's a national icon. He's sort of a very famous guy. He was very, very ahead of his time. So back in, if you watch his documentary, I can't remember what it's called, about him winning the America's Cup.
Oh, look, I probably did a long time ago.
Yeah.
I remember about it.
Yeah, great documentary. If anyone wants it, just Google John Bertrand documentary, America's Cup. So if you see that documentary, like, he was doing visualization, he was doing all that mental performance stuff way before anybody else. Really admirable man. I owe him my career, actually.
Wow.
I love him dearly. And so he was, he said, okay, can I come in and watch the Special Forces? Because these guys know how to perform under pressure. So he had the wherewithal to think, okay, who deals with stress in this world? These guys. I'm going to go see these guys. I know how to get there. So he's sort of walking around, and it was the board of selection. So they'd asked me to come and sit in on the selection process of the new commandos. So they have a very, very rigorous selection process that goes, really over 18 months. Incredibly difficult. I think they start off with hundreds, and then they get whittled down to, I think, between 15 or 30 guys will get through in a year. And so they get every aspect of that personality, their performance, and their life just gets raked over the coals. Peel back the onion, and the man is bare. Like, there's nothing to hide in these selection process, because you want to know who you're getting through, and what does this man, how does he operate under pressure? There's no women had gotten through at this stage, haven't yet. And so I was there, so I did a whole lot of emotional intelligence testing on them, because they know that for the Special Forces, emotional flexibility and emotional management and perception is incredibly important, because they have such a diverse remit. And so I was there, if they had issues trying to work out, should this guy get through or not, they would look at the emotional intelligence scores, and I would tell them what I thought about what I was seeing. And so John Bertrand was like, I was like the only girl there in city clothes, and he's like, who are you? What are you doing here? And I'm like, I'm Gemma, I'm a researcher. And he's like, oh, and then you just see his eyes just lit up, and he's like, tell me more. And he looks in at this certain way, and then I was saying, yeah, so we just did this research, and our research shows that the guys perform under pressure. And I was just sort of saying all the language that he was like looking for, and I was like, here's the data. This is what we've found. They shoot better. Their cortisol levels are better. They perform so much better. Their team dynamics is really good. And he's like, can you come and help the swim team? So I was working with Matt at the time, who was running the human performance wing at the Special Forces, and he was instrumental in helping me build this program. And so he said, you two come with me and let's work with swimmers. And I'm like, oh, okay. I was not actually into sport, had no idea. And I went, yeah, okay. So that's, I always just say yes to everything and work it out later. And so then we, first of all, had to get buy-in from the coaches, because the coaches were sort of the gatekeepers. If the coaches didn't like it, they were never going to let us near the swimmers. And the coaches, loved what we did. And because, Matt's very charismatic, very smart, and he's, war hardened. He'd been blown up in war, and he'd done 4 tours, and, he knows his stuff. He'd been a commando for 20 years. So they really respected him. So I would bring the science, and then he would bring the practical stuff. And so then we trained the top female and the male swimmers. And part of that, getting back to the question you asked me, was we went down to the AIS, and they were doing relay training for the females. And that basically was getting them to train how to do the changeovers for the relays. And it's very stressful, and, you can't really sort of recreate the Olympic environment, because how do you do that? But we knew that we had to stress inoculate them as best we could, because we know that you don't want to wait until they get to the Olympics to see how they perform under stress, because a lot of these swimmers hadn't ever been to Olympics. Some of them had, some of them hadn't. So we were trying to truly like stress test them. What happens when you really feel out of control? What happens when it's all overwhelming? What happens when you've got to perform and you've got a hundredth of a second to do it? So we came up with all these stress inoculation strategies, and so it involved noise, smoke, bombs, music, sirens, battle, noise, babies crying, dogs barking, all this like awful noise while they were trying to train. And then we're getting all of the volunteers and all the people around, like, popping bombs, making noise, clapping, getting water pistols, like squirting all of the swimmers. And then I had this taser, highly illegal, which I'd bought in a market in Turkey, and it was in my bag, forgot about it. Don't anyone from customs ever repeat this. Got it in, and then so we were, I was like, okay, this is pretty scary. So what I would do, as the swimmers were about to jump, I would like go the taser right in front of their face. Then I had this little clicker that stops your mozzie bites from itching. It's like a shock thing. So I'd shock them on the back of the legs while they were like changing over, just so I would say, don't react. And they were amazing. And then we were squirting blood on their feet and blood in the water, and just doing crazy stuff. And later on, they said to me, like, that was incredible, because when I got there and I started to feel stress, I was sort of recalled that moment and said, you know what? I've been tasered, I've been shocked, I've been shot at, had blood on me. I can deal with this moment, because I know under those conditions I was fine. And they did really well. Like, they were incredibly, stoic. And so we did all sorts of things. Like, we took a lot of the people from the AIS in this gold medal ready program. We took them to the regiment. We sleep deprived them. We threw them off the 90-foot tower. We got them to crawl through dirt and darkness. We got them to rappel. We got them to do a whole lot of stuff. Again, with the premise of stress inoculation training. So getting them up there, getting their cortisol up, getting their brains to, like, clock out. We did a lot of education. So before we got them to do these stressful things, I got them to understand, how does your stress response system respond? What do you do when it kicks off? What can you do about it? And I have got all these strategies. And so it wasn't that we just dropped them in these crazy situations. We gave them like science-backed tools to deal with it. So that's, kind of good, is, having little inoculations.
I have to think that if you weren't doing what you were doing, you might have been really good at torturing people. Maybe. Did you do an apprenticeship in Russia?
My kids keep asking me, like, Mum, what did you really do in Russia? Come on. They're very, very suspicious of me, because I start laughing if they go, what did you do in Russia? I'm like, what I told you? They're like, no. And actually this weekend, all their friends were sitting around saying, Jemma, were you a spy? I'm like, no.
Don't let them watch the latest Cameron Diaz movie, because...
What's that one? I haven't seen it.
I can't remember what it's called, but I watched it the other day and it's brilliant, but it's exactly that. They've got these teenage children. Jamie Foxx is her husband, but they were spies. And
is this just based on a true story, I think? Is that?
Oh, no, I don't think so. No,
I heard there is a true story of these Canadians who
maybe
that actually got sent back to Moscow just recently, and the kids had no idea their parents were spies.
Yes, I know. No, this one's a bit of a comedy, I don't think.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, exactly. They spent their whole lives lying to their children. So maybe your kids have watched too many Hollywood movies.
I think they have, yeah.
So you've worked with the military, Olympians, people in corporate.
Bull riders.
I know, and I'm going to ask you. So, you were talking before that the military integrated you into a lot of their stuff that they did, and threw you out of planes and made you do all that.
Yeah.
Did you ever get on a bull?
No. I've got on a mechanical bull.
Oh.
Yes, but not a real one.
Oh.
No, yeah. So Simon Cusack was Kate and Bronte Campbell's coach, and he was a ringer out back with the Kerr family.
Oh,
So that's how.
okay.
So he was telling Marcus Kerr about Matt and I, and then Marcus said, "Well, I think that they should help my son Jake." So that's how we met Jake, who's a bull rider, and that's how we met the family. Yeah, and become friends ever since. Yeah.
So Jake, because I asked Jake what he's my son-in-law to be, so I'm allowed to ask whatever I want. But yeah, I asked him what you did for him, and he said, "Well, Jemma took me from being really wishy-washy." He said sometimes I'd get on a bull and I'd have a really good mindset and I'd be right, and other times I'd get on the bull and my mind would be everywhere and I'd come out and fall off. And she trained me and showed me ways to have that mindset at will. So I'm interested to know what you did, what you said to Jake.
Yeah, I think it was like so much of elite athletes, like they'll have, like you said, they'll have a good day or a bad day, and they don't know why. And it's like this ghost can just appear out of nowhere and like haunt you and ruin your day or your performance. And it's almost like a boogeyman that you fearful that it's going to rear its head just when you don't want it to. And I'm kind of like demystifying that and saying, no, you have to give poor performance a reason. You need to deconstruct every part of your preparation. Like I'm very much into the lead up, the anticipatory stress that you get, your process, the days, the weeks, the days, the hours, the moments, the seconds before you have to perform. And all of that has to be worked out to like a precise formula. And then when you understand and take this formulaic approach to performance, you understand all the factors that either go into increasing performance or detracting from your performance, then it's not this boogeyman. It's like, oh, I know what happened. I did that. And then you can change that. That's in your control. You're not a victim. You're not bewildered. You have agency, autonomy, and structure and process over the outcome, right? So having that sense of control is incredibly important when there are so many variables you can't control. So I train what's in your control, what's out of your control, and get people to write pretty precise plans about it. And the plans involve lots of things. So it's all around cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone, and I talk about how this messes up your performance if it's unchecked. Cortisol is good up until a point, but then if you don't, manage it, it can ruin your performance, ruins your sleep, ruins your ability to build muscle, repair, regenerate, even think properly. And so I say, okay, in the weeks before your performance, how are you eating, sleeping, interacting? What's your mental rumination like? What are you filling your mind with? What are you filling your days with? What are you filling your bodies with? And knowing which ones are good and which ones are bad for you. And that goes right up to the moment. And people just I had no idea that me 2 weeks ago actually ruined my performance on the day. So it's very scientifically driven. And it's like, as I said, that biopsychosocial, how you eat, how you sleep, how you move, how you think, how you interact, who do you let in, like you've got to, particularly like going into the Olympics, like who are you going to let call you? Are you going to have like your parents who are going to be needy or whingy or judgmental? Are you going to get on Instagram and see people give you, bad comments? Are you going to let that happen to you? You produce cortisol, you don't sleep that night, ruined your race because you were scrolling on Instagram. Knowing that, drinking alcohol and eating Maccas 3 days before is going to have an impact on that moment when you're performing. If you want to win, this is what winners do. And just showing what I know other high performers do to win. What foods will increase your speed of processing and your reaction time? What foods will, make you slow, sluggish, and a poor performer? So it's just a scientific, formulaic approach that if you break it down, it gives you a really good mental map. So when you're on that bull or when you're, in that car or when you're about to, jump off the blocks, for a fact you have done everything in your possible, control more so than anyone else around you.
Gemma, can we talk about a little bit about breathing, eating and moving?
Yeah.
Because for me, I know if I don't do those things properly, and when I'm particularly stressed, I realised I wasn't breathing properly. I was breathing to here. Now I just automatically breathe, into my gut, and it really does help me. So but I know those three things really affect how I feel if I'm not looking after myself in those three areas. So
I mean, to be honest, when I heard people breathe, I mean, I did a lot of yoga and I was like, yeah, it's good. But then I was like, everyone breathes, so what? But then when I went to the Special Forces and I was like, what do you guys do? Like when you're, like I've seen footage of them coming in on a helicopter, so they're like head cam footage, jumping out of the helicopter and running towards bullets. Like I'm watching bullets go zoop, zoop, zoop. And I'm like, how on earth do you train yourself and keep calm knowing that you're going to jump off and run towards bullets? Like, how do you get yourself to do that? And they were a bit like, I don't know, like that, don't really think much about it. But when I observed more and more, what they did was breathe. And I was like, that's so boring. I was hoping for something like more like fascinating or interesting. But literally, Mother Nature has given us this incredible stress reduction like machinery factory right in our face, right there, free, can access it anytime you want, and it's really effective. Because most, I think, stress reducing modalities would say, "Oh, move away from that moment, meditate or be mindful or have a bubble bath or do yoga or whatever." But like when you're at that cold face and you have to perform in that moment, you can't do that. You need something that's right there, in your, control in that moment. And that's why breathing's so fascinating and so effective. And so we got really deep into the science of resonant frequency breathing. So everybody has a rate at which they breathe at, which is either, between 5 or 7 breaths per minute. Most people around 6. And so this type of breathing is the most efficient way to breathe so that you're calm but ready for action, and it's the most like metabolically efficient, so you're not burning your wheels, sort of using up energy. And we know that if you breathe through your nose, you've got enzymes in your paranasal sinuses that produce something called nitric oxide, which is a vasodilator. It gives you this extra calmative effect, so it opens up the airways and sort of drops your stress response. And so and we've also got receptors on our top lip here. So if you've got air coming out of your nose and your brain detects that the air is hitting that top lip, your brain goes, oh, you can't be getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger or a bear. You're not going to die, and sort of drops your stress response even more in that moment. So we would train that. We'd test their resonant frequency breathing rate. You can actually go online and just Google it, and you can go through some little tests to work out what your so my neighbour's kids. You could go through and work out what your rate is, and then what we would say is you train that rate 10 minutes a day, twice a day for 6 weeks, and then that gets into your unconscious competence or your muscle memory. So, like when you're stressed out, the last thing you need is like, oh, what was that thing I need to do? So this embeds it deep into your psyche. So the minute you start feeling stressed, you find yourself just go, and you don't even have to think about it, you just do it. And I saw this evidence with the guys at the unit all the time. So one day we all got out of the car and we had to go into this big AIS event, and there was like 200 people there, and the guys would have to speak in public. They didn't really like it. And so as we were walking into the building, they all just simultaneously went, and I was like, did you just see that? And they were like, no, what? And I said, you just all did a resonant frequency breath, just all together. And they didn't even know they did it because they'd embedded it so much into their muscle memory that they just knew when they started to feel the pressure come up, they'd just do it. And so that is like incredible. So now I will just always do that breathing anytime, and I train it all the time. And you said before that when you get stressed, you hold your breath. So from an evolutionary perspective, our brains, like we still think we're back on the savannas of East Africa, because like humans have only really been humans for about 250,000 years. It's when we stood up on the savannas of East Africa as Homo sapiens, right? And so for 250,000 years, we lived in an environment where we had the potential of being predated by a bear, a saber-toothed tiger. So our body and our mechanisms and our responses are adapted to be successful for survival back then. So back then, if you were getting, hunted by something, it was advantageous for you to do lots of short in-breaths to get oxygen into your brain and body, into your big muscle groups. And we know that in-breaths increase heart rate, out-breaths slow heart rate. So if you're about to get killed by something, what do you want? Lots of oxygen to feed your muscles. You want your heart to go faster in case. And you actually don't want to give your scent location away to a predator. So if you get really stressed, you have a tendency to hold your breath in the hope that that thing will go past and won't detect you. So this is a remnant of our evolutionary past, that we still have this and holding breath, because modern society, it's like a 4-second blip compared to the 11 hours and 40 something minutes we've been living like that. So us now holding our breath isn't advantageous, because holding your breath makes your brain go offline. When your stress gets to a certain level, your brain thinks, I need to fight, flee, or freeze, right? I don't need to think deeply about what's about to kill me, because this thing is super expensive. Your prefrontal cortex will take up a lot of energy. So under stress, your brain goes, I need to direct all of this energy that I would go to thinking into my big muscle groups, into my heart and lungs to run. And so that's when we get that mental blanking, that what we call amygdala hijack, because your amygdala is your fear center. It flames up and it goes, okay, don't think deeply, just run, fight. And so your brain will just, we've all had that blank where you go. So that's the resources going to your heart and lungs and muscles. That's it telling your breath to get as much oxygen as you can, and then hold your breath and run. We've still got this, right? People go why am I doing this? Why do I go brain dead when I'm stressed? Why do I hold my breath? And it's like your body still thinks you're on the savannas.
That's so interesting. I hadn't considered why I did that, but
yeah. So if you train your body out of that by 10 minutes a day, twice a day, this deep resonant frequency breathing, you will automatically do that under stress, and it'll keep your brain online, and it stops you from going into that, amygdala hijack. So these are the things that we train people. Understand why your body does this. Understand. So I go through a litany of all these other different physiological responses that people do when they're stressed out. Like heart racing, hands sweating, mouth dry, vomiting. Lump in your throat, and I train them as to why they're actually advantageous for performance. And so I get them to see their stress response as a resource, as something that's going to help their performance rather than hinder their performance. So breathing, incredibly important. I think the other part of your question was, why does sleeping, movement and eating?
Yeah. So what, those three things together?
Yeah, so I as I said, take a formulaic approach to mental health. So I say that sleeping is the foundational pillar. If you can't sleep properly, you will be crazy. It will make you insane. And so I really hated sleeping for many years. I just thought it's super boring and I would not do it. But then I just sort of realized that anyone who I saw who had mental health disruption had a sleep disorder or wasn't sleeping properly. And I'm like, there's something in this. It's really hard to be sane and happy and healthy if you don't sleep. There's not a system in your body that isn't disrupted by sleep deprivation. It ruins every part of your system. And so I became incredibly interested in sleep and looking at how we can measure it, what are the things that affect it, and how I can train people to sleep better, particularly like executives or people who are busy, or teenagers or elite athletes, when everything is going against them having a good night's sleep. And so I teach a lot about sleep. In fact, I'm writing a book for Wiley on sleep. Wow. Yeah, I did was it South by Southwest, and someone from Wiley ran up and said, "You've got to write a book about this." And I'm like, okay. So really incredibly important. Then moving your body. Like you think from, the better part of human, evolution, we were never, ever still. Like we never sat still because we were always like whittling a stick or picking berries or holding a baby or moving, or like we would never be still. So there is this hypothesis called the depression sedentary hypothesis, that because we are so sedentary in our day, our primitive brain gets quite confused. So you think about in our evolutionary past, what were the only times that we were still?
When at night or sick.
Yeah, see, when we were sick, right? And so what do you need to do when you're sick? Sleep and withdraw from the clan so you don't get the other clan sick. And so what does withdrawal and exhaustion and wanting to sleep all the time look like? Depression.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, so like you
in
think,
modern day.
you think you're depressed.
So, yeah.
And there's a whole body of research coming out now that inside our muscles, in particular our skeletal muscles, we've got this incredible pharmacological factory that makes things called myokines. So myokines are proteins that are produced when we move our body, and they actually are anti-anxiety. So everyone knows, you should move your body, but like the mechanisms of why it makes you feel better are sort of more and more being discovered. So if you are feeling down and stressed, if you like to squeeze your long bones, like if you're sitting at your desk, do some ankle raises. I would have like one of those hand squeezy things, have a barbell while you're just sitting at your desk, and getting those stretching of the skeletal muscles will produce these incredible proteins called myokines that will actually make you feel less depressed. There's also the endocannabinoids, there's endorphins, like there's our body, Mother Nature will reward us for moving. So you think back in hunter-gatherer times, we didn't know when we were going to get our next feed, right? So we had to be very careful about energy expenditure. Like you only ran if it was for a very good reason because it used up so many resources. And so if you were running, Mother Nature would give you a reward so you'd keep doing it. Even when you were like exhausted and didn't have enough energy resources, your body would be like, okay, I need to reward you to keep running so you can get more food. So Mother Nature will give us endorphins, myokines, all of these chemicals deliberately to keep us alive. Now we're sedentary, we're not getting those. Your lymphatic system doesn't get squeezed. Like lymphatic system is when you're pushing through all of your, getting rid of all your waste on your white blood cells. That needs muscular propulsion to move through your lymphatic system. Just so many reasons why we need to move our bodies. So I'm a big proponent. If you are a sedentary person, you sit at a desk, you should stand up. So on the bottom of our feet, we've got these pads and these receptors that when your body detects pressure on these pads, it will send a message up to your brain and it will increase the amount of oxygenated blood to your prefrontal cortex by 20 to 25%. So your brain's designed to hit the receptors, need more oxygen to the brain. Also, we've got these long bones, right? This is NASA research, actually. You've got big long bones, and then when you put pressure on these long bones, they secrete certain amounts of hormones that regulate your blood glucose sugar, saying, okay, you need to process your blood sugar more effectively. That it also produces a hormone called osteocalcin, which increases your spatial memory and actually increases male fertility as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So get moving. And if you've got elderly parents or people you're looking after, try and get them on their feet, their pads, their long bones, as much as possible. So get a sitting, standing desk if you can. So when you're doing deep work, like thinking deeply, sit down. When you're doing phone calls, emails, stand up. Yeah.
And what about food?
Everything. It's like, it's the second pillar, I would say.
Yeah.
Or kind of like close race between food and exercise. But I'm really interested in the gut biome research. So we've done some of it and blood glucose research. So I think the gut biome is the new frontier. Like it is very, very highly correlated with mental health, motivation, your sleep, you know, how you're perceived by others, your immune function. In fact, your gut biome trains your immune function when you're little. It is incredibly important. And the stuff that we feed kids, the stuff that we feed ourselves now is diabolical for your gut biome. So it's really hard to stay sane, have good sleep, keep your weight in check when you're not feeding your bugs appropriately. So I'm really big on gut biome. Like I'm super, super strict about food. Like I don't eat any junk food. I don't eat sugar. I drink wine, a lot of wine actually, to be honest. That's the only place I get my sugar. But I'm like, my quote is, I do all the good things always, so every now and then I can do the bad things. And the bad things is, drinking. But I will have protein in the morning, so I don't get my blood glucose spike. I will have nothing packaged. I won't eat anything that has MSG, food flavourings, or any, what are they called, preservatives. I'm like, none of that. I eat meat, vegetables, nuts, fruit. I don't eat a lot of fruit, only berries. I don't eat any wheat at all. I haven't for 24 years.
I was going to ask, how long have you had this, been eating this way for?
So about 23 years, okay. 24 years, yeah. And it just works. Like I feel so good. Because I was pretty unhealthy and I just felt terrible all the time, just tired and grumpy and foggy-headed and just miserable. I worked out that I was really allergic to wheat. So back then I just gave it up and haven't had it since. And the reason, I think a lot of people are getting allergic to wheat is because, there's probably wheat farmers listening to this and they know what they put on the glyphosates, the fungicides, and then, it gets processed, it has bleaches on it. Like the stuff we do to our wheat is like criminal. It's not food anymore, I believe. So I think that you've got to be very, very careful about the amount of wheat that you eat, particularly white bread, the white death. Sugar is terrible. Like our brain is not meant to be exposed to this much sugar. So if you think about hunter-gatherers, they had on average around, 3 to 4 tablespoons of fructose or glucose a year, right? We are eating, I think the last thing I looked at in 2017, I think we're eating like 18 grams of sugar a day. So and that's just like I think on the lower end. And so what happens is, because our brain runs on either glucose or fructose or fructose, our brain exists inside 3 bags or meninges, and it's called the blood-brain barrier. And it's like tight junctions like this, so no germs can get into our ecosystem of our brain, because if you get a bug in there, like you get meningitis and you die. So these bags are very tightly concealed, except for fructose and glucose. If your brain detects high levels of sugars in the cerebral spinal fluid or the blood supply, it'll just open it up and it'll let the sugar go in, because it was so valuable for our hunter-gatherers to get sugar into the brain. It never realised that we were going to be eating sugar breakfast, lunch and dinner every day, all day, and have enormous amounts of sugar being exposed to our brains. And I've actually got an MRI scan in one of my slides that I lecture on, and it shows that, I don't know, osmosis, if you've got a high concentration of glucose on one side and there's a membrane and a low concentration, it will suck the water out of that membrane into that to equalize the pressure. What this means essentially is that high levels of sugar and glucose will shrink your capillaries and your brain cells. I've got a scan to show you this. So there's a lot of research showing that kids who have got a heavy diet of sugar, and particularly Coca-Cola or like sugary drinks, actually have smaller brains, smaller brain volume. And there's a recent study they did of 180,000 people and looking at what foods did they eat. Those that had high sugar, much more depression. So I always say sugar is death. And I don't eat it ever. And would never eat lollies. Maybe once in a blue moon I might have ice cream, but rarely. Just don't eat it. Because I know it makes me feel down. It makes me feel awful. And I think that we should not be feeding our kids sugar. Another thing is important to know, that do not substitute with phenylalanine or the fake sugar.
Oh yeah.
What do they call it?
Equal tablets and
So that the active ingredient in that is phenylalanine, and it has been shown to be incredibly damaging to your multiple regions of your body. It's obesogenic. It ruins your gut biome, and in fact, the World Health Organization are pushing to have it made into a class 2 carcinogen.
Oh.
Yeah, so don't substitute with fake sugar. If you're going to eat sugar. Yeah, so I'm really strict about food. Very, very. And what the research is showing, that if you want to be happy, healthy and strong, eat 40 different plant-based foods a week. And people freak out, wow, that's a lot. But if you just make yourself a curry or a salad with different things in it, you hit 40. And what you're doing is you're increasing your gut microbiome diversity. The more diverse the bugs are in your stomach, the healthier, happier, more resilient you are. It's like when you've got a garden. If you had all just corn, in comes a virus, it'll wipe all the corn out, right? But if you've planted cabbages and radishes and spinach and a virus comes through, it might kill the corn, but at least something will survive. Now, in your gut biome, if you have a bacteria or a virus come in and you've got all the same gut bacteria because you're eating the same types of food, you'll get wiped out. But if you've got, the more different foods you eat, the more different types of bugs, because one bug will eat one food. So you've got to make it diverse down there. And that is different foods. Avoid, alcohol's pretty bad, but if you have antibiotics, it'll knock out your gut biome. And 85% of our serotonin is made by our gut biome. Serotonin's the happy hormone. It's also a precursor to the sleep hormone. So it's all interconnected. What you eat, how you feel, how you sleep goes into how you feel. And when you're sleep deprived, you actually crave salty, fatty, sugary foods, which will, make you have a certain type of gut bacteria that'll make you do you know what I mean? It's like this vicious circle.
One thing I did want to ask you when you were speaking about sleep hormone, so that's melatonin, isn't it? And you said somewhere that if you actually take too much melatonin, then your body won't produce it.
Yeah, so I think there's a really terrible trend that's happening where people are giving their kids melatonin gummies. It's a hormone, right? And so we've got a very complex endocrine system, which is our hormonal system. And you can't just go whacking stuff in with no consequence. And if you've got a doctor and you have a sleep disorder, do what your doctor says, of course. But it's a stopgap measure. I would not be taking melatonin on a regular basis because, producing hormones is very metabolically expensive for your body. It's always trying to find shortcuts, right? And so if it goes, oh, you're getting melatonin for free, they're like, sweet, I should stop producing it. So then if you go off the melatonin, it's even harder for you to get back to a normal set point. And so instead of just just taking melatonin, work out what's wrong with your sleep. Why aren't you sleeping? Is it physiological? Is it biological? What's doing it? And then fix that. And then have it in the moment to get over that whatever is hump. But don't rely on it. If you're traveling, yes, whatever. But I think it's a really dangerous proposition to be giving that to children, especially. I would not be doing that. These have consequences.
You talked about motivation before.
Yeah.
And for me, like, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately, it is hard to get motivated to do something.
Yeah.
But what do you think? Like, do you think what we need to do is motivate ourselves past the instant gratification? Sorry.
Yeah.
So the gratification of staying in bed until, all hours in the morning, or the gratification of having something yummy to eat, like from the bakery or whatever.
Yeah.
Should we get in our minds what that's going to make us feel like, and what we want to feel like in the future? Like, if we don't do those things, where are we going to be?
Yeah, it's like the 1 degree if you turn a ship. It only turns 1 degree, but like 5 years, or like 500 kilometres down the track, that ship will end up in a different country by
So
1
focus
degree.
on the end result.
Yeah, so it's I've looked a lot at this on motivating, because like so much of my job is how do you motivate elite athletes to do the hard stuff, or business people, how do you motivate them to do, stop drinking, go to bed, and do all the things you need to do, because there's so much instant gratification. There's so many like delicious, intriguing things on your phone. There's like chocolate, there's alcohol, there's all this stuff. So we are under assault every minute of the day. We're having to make decisions or having to turn away things that marketers know will just draw our attention, draw us in, and seduce us in. So it's really, I think we should be kind to ourselves and less hard on ourselves when we're like, I'm so undisciplined. Yeah, you have got an army of marketers out there just trying to assault your discipline every minute of the day. So give yourself a break. Like, it is difficult, particularly if you're low socioeconomic, or you're having a marriage breakdown, or a kid's sick, or your job's awful, or you live in somewhere that's noisy and dangerous. Like, your set point or your buffer for energy is so much lower. So I'm very cognizant of like being one of those people who go, just do it, just be healthier, just eat this, or what's wrong with you? No, I understand, because and this is what I talked about, having a breakup made me so much more empathetic, because I know how hard it is to get motivated. So there are a lot of strategies you can do depending on what it is, but it's the middle ground which feels hard. If you're lying in bed and you're like, I've got all this stuff I've got to do today, it's like, oh bugger. I think the middle ground is where if you put your mind there, you won't do so well. So I oscillate between the North Star and the one next step. So we should always have a North Star. Like, I want to look like this. I want to be doing this job, or I want to live here. I want to be earning this money, or I want to be married to someone like this. Like, have the big dream, have the North Star, articulate that very clearly. Like, have a dream diary, just like, free associate of, if you could have the world's most perfect life, what would that look like, feel like, smell like, taste like? Really dream and just get into that, intoxicating, mindset of, just imagine. And your brain cannot tell the difference between imagining and living it, right? So you can actually trick your brain into for those moments you think, this is my life. And then your brain will look for opportunities or situations that actually match that life, right? So that's that dream North Star stuff. And then when you're lying in bed and you go, I feel like shit, I don't want to get out of bed. Yeah, you just do imagine how good a hot shower would feel. Remember when I had that awesome hot shower? And so you savor those little moments and you put them into your memory bank, so then you can remember a hot shower felt good. And it's just about getting the motor going, just rolling, and you just say, I've got all this really hard stuff to do. I'm just going to do 5 minutes. I'm just going to do 5 minutes of that, and then I'll go back into bed. And you know what happens? After 5 minutes, you go, you know what? I'll just do 10 minutes. All right, and then you sort of just start moving. Get the pressure on your pads. You get the osteocalcium. You get the myokines coming out, and then it doesn't feel as overwhelming, insurmountable. Just move. Just do one thing. Just do one thing. So either put your head up there, or the one thing in front of your face. And you've got to understand all the things that will detract from motivation. We've got this petrol tank of energy. It is a well of energy. And you've got to be really careful that thinking negative thoughts drains that energy. Negative thoughts are metabolically expensive. You understand that negative thoughts aren't just these ephemeral things that go off into the ether. thoughts create chemicals, and these chemicals have a consequence. They are expensive to make, they're expensive to metabolize, they're expensive to get rid of. They mess with your sleep, they mess with your immune function. So be very careful about what you let run around in your head. That's key. Thoughts will make you tired.
I'm so glad you explained that, because I wanted to find out, with your science background, what you thought about manifesting and writing affirmations, and you've answered it, but you've given such an in-depth answer to why those things work. And do you mind just sharing the story about your mum when she had bone cancer?
Yeah, so actually I was in Moscow, my dad rings up and says, "Get home, your mum's dying." That, and I was like, "You're an asshole." But you know, I got home and my mum was so gorgeous. She was like, "Oh, don't worry, I'm fine." But she had found a very big cancer in her tibia. I think she'd been walking around the farm with those weighted straps.
Oh yeah.
And I went, and then she went and she got a scan, and they were like, "This isn't good." And she got a biopsy, and they said, "Okay, we are going to cut your leg off." And she just went, "That is devastating." Like, my mum's so beautiful, and she was dressed so beautiful, and she'd wear high heels, and like, just the thought of losing a leg would be, like, for anyone, would be devastating. And she said, "You know what? No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it." And so she was really, like, again, ahead of her time, and she had a book, and she just would write affirmation after affirmation, and she would, like, put herself in the position of, like, it's already better, healed, and a position of gratefulness. Like, everyone knows about this now, but back then that was really, I think that was in, like, 90s, like, not many people were talking about it. So she would be like, "Thank you for all of the things in her life." She'd, like, have a list of them. "I'm grateful for this and grateful for that." And she'd spend a lot of time reading. She had this book of quotes, of all the great quotes of all the great thinkers throughout history, and she'd read it, and it was like brainwashing. I'm not a victim, I'm not sick, I'm not going to die, I'm not going to, this is not going to be my reality. And she just changed her reality. And it worked, and she's 74 now. Yeah. And I think that she's still got this, like, spongy tumor in her leg, but she just refuses to let that succumb to that. And I think that when you look at oncology research, one of the greatest predictors of how well someone does within their cancer treatment is the attitude of their oncologist.
Wow.
Yeah. So if he has, like, "I've seen this before, you're going to be fine, you will live," people actually, believe it. I think that science really has not caught up to, like, the mechanisms of this, but I remember in Russia they would never tell. Like, they said, "Your mum's got cancer. How does she know?" I said, "Because they told her." And they were like, "They what? They told her?" I'm like, "Yeah." They said, "No, we don't tell people who've got cancer. We don't do that because it makes them sicker." Yeah. I was like, I don't know if it's true, but that's what they'd said to me. So what you believe, your belief system around your situation is very predictive of your outcomes. So you've got to be very careful what you read, what you think about, who you associate with. If you've got cancer, like, go and seek out people who've gotten better. Don't go to miserable groups that everyone talks about how terrible their life is. Be different. Be brave. Be resilient. And don't believe people when they say you've got 6 weeks. Don't believe them. I mean, see your family, visit them, do all the right things, but have somewhere deep in your kernel of your soul saying, "No, this isn't me." And like, there's remarkable stories about it, and do all the things: eat well, sleep well, ice bath, sauna, do all the things that trick your body into thinking that I've got this.
You're healthy.
I'm healthy. Yeah.
There's a lot of talk around now these days about our vagus nerve. So can you talk me through the vagus nerve, where it is, what its function is?
Yeah, so I love this, and I'm glad you asked, because we've just finished a big research project on this. So the vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve. It's called the vagus nerve, the wandering nerve, because it's the longest nerve in the body. Kind of comes down here under your clavicle, and then comes out and down, goes down here, and goes down to the tip of your spinal cord. your tailbone. And so it really does a lot of things. We're finding out more and more that you've got gazillions of receptors in your stomach that attaches to the vagus nerve. So that gut instinct, that sort of listen to that, because it's literally all of your nerve endings in your stomach is sending a message up to your body. It sends all the messages from pressure, heat, balance, all the sensory perception goes up and down this nerve, goes up into your thalamus and then goes into different parts of your brain, and then your brain works out what you're doing, and it sends it back down the vagus nerve to then to like either your heart goes faster, or your sweat, or your lungs pump, or your legs move. So it really is, I think, the central superhighway, and so I got really interested in the vagus nerve is because when I was at the regiment and when I was looking at elite athletes when they were stressed out, I saw them doing that. Usain Bolt before the 100 meters, or I used to see the commandos where they'd do this before they jumped out of a helicopter or something, and I'd be like, what is that? And what we found was those people who were in that heightened stress, your brain went dead, there's that mental blanking, and you're overwhelmed. If you do this, it kind of resets that frenetic messaging going up and down the vagus nerve that will then go and send a message to your brain to go offline, and then send your resources to your brain, to your body, to run or fight. You could interrupt that message by doing a vagus nerve reset. And so I started training all of the Olympic athletes at the gold medal ready program. Do this if you feel super overwhelmed before your race, anytime that you're felt yourself going into that mental blanking situation. And it was working. And I remember once we were in this big room, there was 200 people, and we were talking. I taught the athletes about this. And we're in this big room, and one of the athletes was talking about, one of the rugby sevens athletes was talking about when they were over at the Olympics, they got a message that their mother was about to die. I think they've even passed away. And this athlete just started bawling, just weeping, snot bubbling, like this, crying. And the whole room was silent. It was 200 people in the room. And this poor athlete just could not get it together. It's and everyone was just, no one wanted to get off the topic or jump in, because it was just such a heavy moment. And then I was and they went, oh, that worked, and just popped out of this grief situation right there and then, and went, and what I was saying was, and then just started talking. It was in front of all those people, they saw, wow, that actually does work.
You know, you saying that, I have thought back to times when I've been particularly upset, and I didn't know any of that, but I've gone like that, or you just go like that.
Yeah.
And so that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've realised I have done it.
If you think people go back, that there is that. And so I was teaching this, and then my boss at the AIS goes, where's the peer-reviewed evidence? Everything has to be evidence-based, that if you're coming from the AIS. And I'm so I was researching, and all I found was there was some depression research for people who had persistent depression that was not responding to drugs. If they put electrodes into their brain or hit the vagus nerve with electrical stimulation, they were coming out of resistant depression. And I was that's the only reason, but we're not going to go put electrodes into athletes. So she said, you can't actually teach it if there's no, they have a rule that everything's got to be evidence-based, which is a good idea, right? So they're not being taught snake oil and crazy stuff. And so I was that's a pity. So then I had a PhD student reach out to me from the British Commandos, from the British Naval, he's a naval officer, and he wanted to replicate my PhD on stress and emotional intelligence. And I said, yeah, I will help you on the proviso that you do vagus nerve reset research for me. And he said, it's a deal. Mm-hmm. So we've got this great relationship that I've been helping him with his PhD. He's just finished. He's just about to hand it in. And so he was over in Devon in Lipstone at the southern part of the UK. I went over to visit, and so he ran this big study looking at does the vagus nerve reset help people keep their memory online in high stress environments. And so we split half the commandos. Half of them, these guys are trying to get through commando selection. Half of them we trained in the vagus nerve reset, mental flip and breathing, and the other half were trained in something else. And then he put them through all these very stressful stress serials, like throwing grenades. You know the dunker, where you get into that mock helicopter blindfolded and you get dunked, like terrifying.
Yes.
Then you have to swim out. That one, rappelling off the cliffs of Devon, parachuting, all of these stressful things. And he gave them coordinates at the start of the stress serial, and then looked at, did they remember those coordinates at the end of the stress serial? And so the data showing people that did the vagus nerve reset did so much better, got through commando selection, their recall of the military things I had to remember so much better. And so, so he's actually coming out to Australia. He's really lovely, really interesting guy. So incredible background, this guy. Has done a lot of things, has been deployed many times to war zones. And so, we did this amazing vagus nerve reset research. But it's really, I think, it is pretty much the superhighway through which your body knows what to do, how to respond to your environment. There's a lot of tools that are coming out, like these little things you can put on your chest that vibrate, or there's things you put around your neck. That if you just Google vagus nerve, applications, there's a lot of stuff out there now.
Gemma, thank goodness for people like you who study all of this so that we and impart your knowledge to other normal people like us.
Well, see, interestingly, I was a hardcore scientist, and then when I got divorced, I felt disillusioned with the world. So then I got really into yoga. So I was doing Ashtanga yoga all the time. And so I think I read a lot of the metaphysical, sort of more the hippie spiritual stuff, read lots and lots of books, and heard of all these modalities that, people were coming up, do this and do that. And a lot of them I thought were like amazing, but because there wasn't science, like peer-reviewed academic science behind it, people would never get to know about it. There was the people who were in the spiritual community who would. There was a lot of snake oil as well and gypsy tears. And so I was like, I really want to study scientifically things that the ancients have known for thousands of years, put some hard science behind it, and sort of demystify the things that are, BS, and really hone in on the things that really work. And so that was my motivation for going into a PhD, is to really learn about how do you manage stress using ancient principles, but with really modern science behind it.
It's just, it's fascinating, and it's so wonderful for humans to understand why we do certain things and why we react in certain ways. So thank you. Now, I just want to have one last question, and you were talking about your mum's quotes before, and I love quotes. So what is your favourite quote?
Well, this is the one I keep saying to my mum now, because she does like to chat about, with her friends for hours. And I'm like, Mum, remember what Eleanor Roosevelt said. You know this one, the great quote?
No.
Small minds talk about people. Average minds talk about events. Great minds talk about ideas. So I'm always saying, Eleanor Roosevelt. But I suppose the other one I say is do the good things most days. So every now and again you can do bad things, like chocolate or wine. Yeah. So they're
mine is remember why you started. So when you start something and you have great ambition, and then things get tough and you want to give up, remember why you started that. And that.
Well, I suppose everything you do should have a why. If it doesn't have a why, don't do it. If you're just mindlessly doing things because that's what we always did, I think that's step before yours is get a why, understand your why, and then remember your why.
Thanks, Gemma. Now I'm going to have to line Matt up.
Yes.
At some point
he
too.
Hates talking about himself. You'll have to drag questions out of him because he doesn't like talking about himself. But he's got the most amazing life, and he's the most amazing human ever. Like he's gracious, and talk about motivation. That guy leaps out every day and just goes. Yeah. So yeah.
Just incredible. Thanks, Jemma.
Thanks for having me.
Oh no, thank you. It's been wonderful.
No.